My name is Megan Brett Hamilton. I'm a speech language pathologist and assistant professor, and I'm so glad you're here listening to the Honeybee Connection podcast by MB. This is your podcast to understand how language, culture, and other parts of our identity play a role in how we communicate. In each episode, I have a pretty awesome one-on-one conversation with my guest. Then I offer tips and insight into how we can better communicate with each other, with a focus on language and culture. All right, let's get started. My guest today is Chris Love. Chris Love is a tribal attorney and unapologetic reproductive justice advocate living in Arizona. I have known Chris since the 7th grade. We ended up being in many of the same classes together. Goodness gracious, from social studies to calculus to whatever. We were also both cheerleaders, and she was actually 1/3 of my prom date. Hi, Shandy. Hi, Joy. So let's listen to why and how Chris associates language with music.
So let us begin with Chris Love. Hello.
Hey, I'm excited to be here to be your first guest.
I'm so excited. Well, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself first. Tell us, where you're from, what you do, that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, I grew up in Silver Spring with you, but currently I'm living in Chandler, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix. I am a tribal attorney, so I work with indigenous tribes, tribal governments, tribal enterprises, tribal individuals here in the Southwest. I am currently the board chair for Planned Parenthood Advocates of Arizona, which is the political advocacy and education organization that supports the work of Planned Parenthood Arizona clinics throughout the state. That takes up a lot of my time, and it's unpaid. So it's like my second full-time job that I don't get paid for.
Okay. Nice. Okay.
My third full-time job, and then I'm a wife and a mother. I have a 6-year-old. My husband and I have a 6-year-old together, and then we also have some bonus children who range in age from 25 to 6.
Okay. Wow. I don't think I knew that part at all.
I've been busy, Megan.
You've been very busy. You've been very busy. So for everyone out there, I don't want to tell our age for everything, but I mean, we went to school together from about 7th grade to 12th grade, right?
Yep.
So we went to White Oak Middle School. Actually, at the time, it was called White Oak Intermediate School.
Intermediate.
And then we went to Springbrook High School together.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about growing up in Silver Spring, Maryland. What do you remember about your experiences there? Just, in general, like what are your thoughts about where we lived?
Well, I loved growing up in Silver Spring. Actually, I moved there when I was in the 2nd grade, and we had moved from, my dad is an engineer who worked for IBM, so they were always sending us all over the place, and I think we had moved from like Florida to Silver Spring, and it was a wonderful experience growing up. It felt as idyllic as it could be, especially for the time. I grew up, I was the oldest of 4 kids. My parents are still together, and interestingly enough, they live down the street from me. Yeah.
Awesome.
But, it was a very, I don't want to say culturally diverse because that's cheesy, but it was a very culturally rich environment. I'll say
I like that. Well, can you delve deeper? What do you mean when you say culturally rich?
I think that obviously we grew up in a space where there were lots of people that looked like us, but also lots of people who didn't look like us, right? So we had a very ethnically rich community. There were, our school was kind of very mixed with regard to race and ethnicity, and it's something that I don't think most people experience, and I didn't, I thought it was a normal experience until I went to college, right? Sorry, that was my work email.
Okay,
I thought it was a normal experience, but we had a large Black community, we had a large white community, a very Jewish community, we had a large immigrant community from all over the place, right? From all over the globe. We had a lot of Asian immigrants, we had folks from Africa, from all of the countries in Africa. We had a lot of East Asian folks, a lot of East Indian folks. It was just very, very, like when you think of like a diverse area, that's where we grew up, and it was right outside of Washington, D.C. So I think that some of that diversity is, due to the fact that we were right there at the nation's capital.
I didn't think about that. Yeah. That is what's so funny about what you're saying is exactly what I've been trying to tell people that since I moved away from Silver Spring. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. I guess it was a bubble because we thought this was normal. I thought it was normal to live across the street from people who were Jewish and people who were from Pakistan and people who were from the Middle East. I thought that was normal to be in classes with them. I really did. And then we grow up and I'm like, what in the world? I met people, Chris, who were like, oh, I've never really met a Jewish person.
My roommate in college was looking at my yearbook, and she and I are still friends. But she grew up in Thomasville, North Carolina, the place that makes the furniture.
Oh, yes, Thomasville. Yes.
Right? Thomasville. Yeah. So she grew up there, and they had railroad tracks in her town, and, white people lived on one side of the tracks, Black people lived on the other side of the tracks, and there was nobody else. There goes. Yes. Right. And she looked at my yearbook and she was like, wow, I've never seen so many Orientals before.
Oh, God. Okay. Ouch, ouch, ouch to the ears.
My heart literally stopped. Right. My heart literally stopped. And I was like, no, Asian. And she's Chinese. Right?
Stop.
This person is Korean. That's
my gosh.
Right?
Chris, I lied to you not. I had that same experience when I went to college. It was kind of like it set my body into shock from the things that people would say. I'm like, wait, why would you? Well, how did you? And it was the pure definition of ignorance. And I didn't try to be mean and disrespectful to people, but I was like, they just didn't know.
Right.
And I guess they didn't know because they didn't have to know.
No. And I think it's funny. We had very similar experiences because we both went to college in the South. Right. Yep. And, even though Maryland is south of the Mason-Dixon line, where we grew up in that DMV area was very much unlike what we would consider Southern because of the diversity that was there. So, you went to school in Virginia and I went to school in North Carolina. And so to go from that really diverse area to these places that felt really just Black and white, and there were like a few Native folks. There was a sprinkle of Native folks.
A little sprinkle.
Oh yeah, just a little sprinkle. To go from everybody, going from like the UN to whatever it was that we went to, it was a culture shock. And then I moved to Arizona.
Go ahead. I'll take a sip of nothing that I have right now, but I'm listening. Yes.
Arizona, as diverse as I thought, I went from not a progression, but it was the exact opposite. So I went from this really culturally rich environment to something that was less culturally rich, but there was still a critical mass of Black folks there. So I had my people that I could relate to moving to Arizona, where we make up about 4% of the population here. Our state here is very white. They're also very Latinx, right? So, which is, the diversity here. It's like going to North Carolina, except all the Black people are like Latinx, right? And we have 21 federally recognized Indian tribes here. So it's diverse in a very different way, but not in a way where there's a critical mass of Black people.
4%.
So it's interesting.
There.
No, not even close. So it's really interesting here to try to make a Black community and find Black community here in Arizona. And, you know, still Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States. And you would think, being the 5th largest city in the county that I live in is the 4th most populous county in the United States.
Oh my gosh, I never knew that.
And there's a sprinkling of us, and I'm related to half of us, right? Because my family moved here. That's how I ended up.
So you're about 0.5% of the
right.
The Loves, 0.5%.
Right. Pretty much, yeah. People refer to my sister and I as the Love Sisters. That's how we're known in like political spaces here in Arizona.
Oh, I love that.
Well, yeah, you love it. There are some people that don't love it so much, and they call us the Hate Sisters. But that's a story for another time.
Okay, I'll put that bookmark. In my brain. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we've had this experience. We've had this awesome experience. Then we grow up and we realize we lived in a freaking bubble the whole time. Like, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit to kind of what I love to talk about, which is language and communication. So talk to me about what you remember about how you learned to speak, like, where your parents from and this first, however, from 0 to 2nd grade. So a little bit about that.
So both of my parents were born and raised in Durham, North Carolina, and they've known each other since they were about 12. They went to junior high together, right? They met on the safety patrols. It's really funny.
Okay. That's so cute. That's so cute. Oh my God.
I know, right? And my parents were both, because they were Black in the South, they were looking from very religious families. My mom is a preacher's kid, so my grandfather, my mom's father is a Baptist minister, and so my mom is one of 6 kids, and they were all singers. So they would travel all around and sing, right? So I think that is very important. My dad is into music as well. He's not the best singer, but he can hold a tune, and he used to sing in choirs and stuff, right? So I think that I associate learning language with music a lot. It's very musical for me because my mom would sing to me, and I would learn the words to songs because my mom wouldn't remember them. She had so many songs in her head. So I would be in the choir stand singing with the adults with my mom feeding her the words to the songs, right? I can remember. Right. I can remember. So my first name is Christopher, which is a very long name to spell for a kid. And I remember my mom and my aunt teaching me like hand claps to spell my name. So I learned to spell my name Christopher. I will remember it for the rest of my life, right? So everything about language for me feels very musical. And I think because of that, I am so into music as well. Just learning the first thing that I ever read out loud to my parents was the liner from the Thriller album.
Such an 80s
right?
Such an 80s kid. That's awesome. Oh my God, I never knew. That's beautiful, Chris.
Oh, thanks. It's just,
that was not, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was not expecting that answer. That's awesome. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this makes me curious. So, all right, so you learned it from your mom and your dad. Mm-hmm. You had this musical background, so everything kind of felt very musical. Mm-hmm. And clearly these experiences influenced you. I'm curious. I love any way to, I have this obsession with learning styles, right? And working in the school system as a speech language pathologist, I'm always keen to different children's learning styles and what works for them. And so what's fascinating to me is I'm listening to you and, it was music, it was kind of mnemonics, it was that. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about how you think race played a part in that.
Well, yes.
I'm like, I don't know how many parents I would say, C-H. I'm like, oh.
Well, I think that, I think it served me well as a little Black kid, right? And I think you and I both had that experience of being like the smart Black kids, where they put us off in like the smart classes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure you got the criticism that you sounded white and all that, you know.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
know, and you know, back in the day, I used to think that made me like a snowflake or something, some unique snowflake, but it's not. That, you know, I think that there are Black people all across the country that have similar upbringings to what we had, and have these similar experiences, to the fact where it's just so common,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think my use of language, you know, obviously served me well as a Black student, right? As a Black kid. And it set me, I got better treatment than other Black kids, quite frankly.
Let's talk about that. Let's go there. Okay, in fact, you hit the nail on the head, because
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the fact that, so this is a podcast, so no one can tell that she put smart in quotes, right? And I know what you mean. We are smart. We are, but it doesn't mean we're smarter than the Black kids who weren't in our classes.
Absolutely.
So Chris and I can name a few more, and I'm not going to name their names, but there's probably 2 or 3
Mm-hmm.
from 7th grade to 12th grade. It was the sprinkling of us,
Mm-hmm.
and then half Asian, half white, probably,
Mm-hmm.
right? In our AP classes, our gifted and talented, whatever you want to call it. So talk a little bit about that, about how the other Black kids weren't in our classes and how that connects to language.
Well, I think a lot of that is, you know, I think that we had these voices and uses of language that could pass, right? So I don't have an accent, I don't have a heavy affect, and now I can speak AAVE like anybody else's business, and we do that, you know, we can code
Mm-hmm.
switch well, and I think that that's what makes Black kids and Latinx kids and Indigenous kids very special, because we
Mm-hmm.
know how to move in and out depending on where, you know, what our where we are socially, right? But I think, you know, because I sounded white or I talked white, I was less threatening. You know, I didn't have an accent. I didn't have, so, you know, that maybe, and I'm sure you got this a lot, you're not really Black.
Yep.
Now look at me. Well, your viewers can't see,
Yep.
but I am phenotypically Black.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I've got a wide nose. I've got these lips that just came into style, right? But I thought for my entire life, I remember being in junior high, trying to like purse my lips so they wouldn't look as big, because they were huge, right? And now everybody's paying money for these things.
I know.
Right? So I'm blackety Black. It's not like,
girl, blackety black. I was so confused.
Hair, I don't got green eyes. I'm not light skinned. My mom is very light skinned, right? She got 2 Black ass parents.
Black with 2 Black ass parents. Yes.
Right. And so, you know, that never, you know, anytime anybody said that to me, I never felt like it was a compliment. I didn't know how to take it. Like, I think
me neither.
They meant it as a compliment. Oh, you're not one of them. But I'm like, but I am. But I am. Y'all treat me that way in certain circumstances, for sure, right? Yep. But I'm the non-threatening Black friend, so it's okay.
Yep. Everything you're saying, I completely feel. And what was always hard for me is I got it, and I'm sure you did too. It was from both ends. Like, I always felt like I was in the crack, like I didn't fit. So like the white people were like, well, you're not like the rest of them. I'm like, well, first of all, the rest of them is like my family and my friends. So when you talk about the rest of them, okay, like, have you been down south to South Carolina where my family is? That you know. But then the Black people, for me, they didn't think I was Black enough, right? And so it was, and then it was like, well, you don't sound like us, and you don't hang out with us. And I'm like, I know like 3 of you, right?
Well, and so we weren't in classes together, right?
Exactly, we weren't in classes together.
So we weren't given any opportunity to even socialize.
Yeah,
they tracked us so hard, right? So we weren't even given any time to like socialize with the Black kids that weren't in those classes with us. And when we did, like, I remember just, you know, I wanted them to like me so badly, but I didn't know how. you know, like I didn't know how to do that. And it was funny because I, you know, I always knew, but there's a lot of like weird disassociation, I think, that you have to have in order to exist in a very suburban setting, being one of like the chosen few,
Yep.
you know, the talented 10th or whatever.
Oh,
And it's so
boy.
funny to me because I, you know, now, am I allowed to curse, Megan? I'm kind
Yes,
of,
I think I cursed
okay.
a few times. And
Okay,
I
okay,
always
great.
curse.
Great, great. So I just needed to ask.
Yes, yes.
But there's a lot of like, there's just a whole lot of bullshit that
Yeah.
I don't ascribe to that anymore, but it took a lot of time to unlearn. And now, you know, because I have Black cousins and all that kind of stuff, so I could relate to them. And they gave me a little ribbing about, you know,
Yes.
sounding right or whatever, but I could play spades and I could do I knew all the lyrics to all the songs and all that kind of stuff. So I could move in those circles, but it took me until I got to college to really figure out that, oh, okay, so number one, I'm not a special snowflake because I'm in a school with 30,000 people and like a lot of them are Black just like me.
Yep.
And probably a lot more well off and, you know, really well educated as well. So I was like, well, I don't even feel, you know, special. But there were some other socializing things that I had to like, to get straight when dealing with other Black kids because I just didn't feel equipped, I guess. But then I realized that I also was one of the few people walking around with friends who were of different ethnicities. And I always kept my circle of folks that I was close with very diverse.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was friends with, you know, one of my closest Black friends to this day is a friend that I made playing softball at Carolina, Black woman, all right? And, you know, we had very similar experiences growing up as well. And she's awesome. And then I have a lot of Native friends. I practice Indian law now, right? So I think that because have this really diverse, rich background, upbringing, and because we could code switch very well. And there were just things that I was better at culturally speaking, like cultural competency.
Yeah.
I think that came from my upbringing, but also experiencing being one of a very few in wherever I went. And still, I'm always one of a very few, just by virtue of living in Arizona. I'm one of a very Right. I'm one of a very few Black people who practices in law, so I kind of stick out, right? You know, and so I'm used to it. It doesn't bother me. But I miss being in an area that was culturally rich and inclusive of my culture.
Yep.
I do miss that.
I love what you said. How did you word it? When you went to college, there's still things you had to unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love that. I remember, my dad made me apply to like 10 colleges, right?
Mm-hmm.
I applied to 9. It was a little, like whatever.
You ain't right.
And I got into, I think, all of them except for one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to determine where I was going to go. And there were choices between predominantly white institutions, BUs, and I chose Hampton.
Right.
But the reason I chose Hampton, so I didn't also realize that certain people choose to go to certain places because that is where they are most comfortable, right? Like, well, I went to a school, for example, I had a friend who went to school, all Black schools growing up, and ended up going to HBCU because she just wanted to stay around Black people. Right. But again, you and I came from this really diverse Silver Spring, Maryland. So I remember I had a really long, deep conversation with myself one night in bed. And I said, you cannot be uncomfortable around your own race for the rest of your life. And I said, I'm going to go to Hampton. Right. I'm going to put myself in a position where I'm going to feel uncomfortable and then I'm going to be okay. And that first semester, both my brothers were there at the time. I have 3 brothers, 2 of them were there. And one of them pulled me aside, picked me up from a party. He said, so how you doing? How's it going? I was like, I'm okay. He said, you all right? And I said, I didn't change the way I spoke. I didn't change the clothes I wear. I didn't change the way I do my hair. And all these Black people want to be my friend.
Right.
And it felt amazing, Chris. And Black guys wanted to date me.
Now that's the look.
I was like,
that's the kicker. I
that
didn't
was really
experience that until college either.
right? But I was just like, and I had to unlearn what was implicitly taught to us.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, there's always more than one way to be anything, and there's more than one way to be Black. And I think that that's something that we all should come to, especially if we come from an environment where we're like the little snowflakes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
always one way to be Black, and I'm still Black, and
I'm still Black. I can't not be Black.
I'm awkward, and I am nerdy, and there are things about me that now they're all cool, right? It's cool.
Right. Right.
Games. I've been playing video games since Atari 2600.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So now, those things are cool now, but those have always been part of who I was, and there's always just more than one way to be Black, and I'm fine with that, and I try to instill that in my kids as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So that is 2 points I want to ask before we go. One was, your kid. So are there any things you're paying particular attention to as far as how she speaks? Does she ever say something in a way that you feel you need to correct her because maybe it sounds like Black English, African-American English? People call it all different things.
Well, it's funny because my mom is my parents just came. I heard the doorbell ring. She's always been a bookish, like proper speaking lady, which is funny to me because she also looks like a drunken sailor, right? That's where I learned. Awesome. But I do find myself correct, Quinn, but not because of how Black it sounds. It's more of like, okay, kid, let's get your subject verb agreement together. And she's getting at the point now where she's reading a little bit and writing. And so I think it's more of like, okay, well, this is the right way to do it because this is, how the verbs agree or whatever. This is the past tense, or not I eated, but I ate, things like that, right?
Right.
So I haven't fallen into any of that other stuff just yet. For my older bonus kids, they're always really proper too. Like they talk their slang and their AV and all that kind of stuff, and I don't care. That's fine. I think that it's fun for them, and because we're around so few Black people here,
right?
That's the way that they need to express themselves. So I'm fine with that. I'm more worried right now about, the fact that my 6-year-old prefers white baby dolls to Black ones. That's the stuff that I'm more worried about.
Oh, Chris. Oh, Chris.
Right? And it's not, no matter what you do, but Megan, I refuse to bring a white doll into this house for years and years. It didn't matter, right? Because they leave this house.
Yep. Yes.
They leave this house and they watch TV and they do all of these things. So now I'm starting to see some of that with her, and I'm trying to correct that. But her language, she's got a big vocabulary. She's a free-spirited little thing, and she's funny. Right now she's coming into her comedy. So she'll tell you funny jokes and things, or she'll say something hilarious, and I think it's the cutest thing.
Of course you do, Mom.
Otherwise, but I mean, so language things, but still she's very lyrical as well, right? And so she learns, she hears a song once or twice, she's got all the words. Now she might have fewer words for it, but she's got the cadence,
right,
sounds, and all that kind of stuff, right? And so she's very, she's musical and very oral in her learning as well. So we pass that down, and my husband's the same way. He's a music too, so I think it just passes down. It's generational.
That's nice because I'm gonna tell you one thing. I was the course president in sixth grade. I was an alto, but
Ah,
I really don't know why. It could have been the whole token thing. You never know, you
maybe,
know? And we'll never
maybe.
know. We'll never know. But we do not have that lyricalness in our house. I mean, we have a little bit. We're not awful.
Mhm.
My mom has some difficulties. But other than that, we hold our own a little bit, but we are definitely not the Loves. We are not the Loves. No, 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 no. Oh my goodness. Well, Chris, is there anything else you want to share with my lovely listeners? Uh,
No, I am just so excited for you. I'm excited for your podcast. I'm
thank you.
excited for your book. I love that you're doing
Oh,
all of
thank
these
you.
big things. And
Thank
I couldn't be more proud of all that you've accomplished. And I'm so happy that you thought of me to do little old me to do this.
you. Oh, man.
Everybody goes off and gets famous and all that kind of stuff. And so just remember the little people.
You are so not a little person. You have so much personality, girl. Well, thank you for being on my show. Thank you for being my first guest. I'm so excited. I will let you know how it goes, but this was great. It actually, it's one of those things too where we grow up and we don't really talk about it. We just
Mhm.
kind of go through life and you figure it out, right? But sometimes, for me at least, it helps to talk about it and realize, oh, it's not the only one.
Oh,
Thank,
oh,
thank God.
thank goodness.
Thank God. That was hard. That was hard.
Yeah.
That concludes my conversation with Chris Love. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Stay tuned for insights and tips I'd like to share from that conversation. There are so many great topics I could pull out from that conversation with Chris Love, but we'd be here all day. So I want to talk about two things. One, how language is musical, and two, how there's more than one way to be Black. So let's talk about the first one. Language is musical. It was so great for Chris to share that story with us about how she learned how to spell her really long name, right? Christopher. It also makes me think about why she became a cheerleader. Kidding. But I think it's important for us to understand that language is musical. There is so much research out there that talks about the relationship between helping children with autism improve their language skills through music, helping people with aphasia who've lost their language rehabilitate through music, people with dementia who haven't spoken in years, and how they listen to music and they find that language again. In the classroom, when we are teaching our children how to learn to read, we start with things like phonics and phonological awareness. We also start with rhyming. There's this cadence and this rhythm that comes with language that's so important for us to understand, right? Now, I know Chris's mom is not a speech language pathologist, but I love that she was able to take this innate cultural piece of herself, right, which was music, this love of music, and she turned it into a learning opportunity for her daughter to learn how to spell her name. I think that's really important for us to understand. But I also want to provide a new insight. Dialect. We don't talk about it that much, but I think it's really important that we do. There is a rhythm and there is a cadence to the way that we speak, right? And it's culturally influenced. I do a lot of workshops, and when I do them, I have people read text from a language they're unfamiliar with. And you should hear them. It cracks me up every time. They sound monotone, they sound staccato, they don't really know how to say the words on the page because they don't know how it sounds. They don't have the cadence to it. And this is really important for us to understand, right? Mainstream American English has a different cadence than African American English, and it has a different rhythm than Southern White English, and it has a different beat to it than Chicano English. I mean, there is so much joy and beauty into listening to the different ways that people speak and the different ways that people sound. And yes, some sounds are going to sound more familiar and comfortable and enjoyable than others because that's how you were raised, right? Sadly, our society makes it think that there are certain languages and dialects that are better than others, but truthfully, there really isn't, right? And just how music is culturally embedded, right? Think of all the different genres there are of music. There's country music, there's rap, there's hip hop, there's R&B, there's blues, there's Cajun, there's reggae, there's so many different genres of music. That is also the way that language is. There's different genres of language. There's different musical backgrounds of language, right? It's the way that we speak. And I think it's really important for us to just kind of pull that piece from Chris's conversation, right? Language is musical. Language is lyrical. And the second piece of information I want to pull out from that interview with Chris Love is how there's more than one way to be Black. Now, we know this. There's more than one way to be Black, to be white, to be Mexican, to be French, to be Congolese. We know this. But I think that was so important for her to state that, because we come with this idea that Black people are a monolith. And if you don't speak African American English, you're not Black enough. And if you speak mainstream American English, you're white and you're an anomaly. You're different. You're better than the other Black people who speak African American English. And that is simply not true. And I say this for people listening who are my same race and ethnicity. I say this for people listening who are not my same race and ethnicity, right? The way I speak, and growing up, I learned mainstream American English. That's also part of my identity. That's a part of my Blackness. It may not be the part that is, shown on the news all the time, but it is. And when African American English speaking children speak African American English, that is also part of their identity. There is more than one way to be Black. And I think that's really important to understand, that the way we speak is a huge part of our identity. And just because you speak a way that you're not expected to, right? It doesn't make you less in any way, shape, or form. All right. That's all I have to say about that. I hope you enjoyed this first episode of Honeybee Connection podcast. I know I did. For more information on music and language, I have posted resources in the podcast notes. If you'd also like more information on African American English, or to buy my manual on strategies for successful classroom communication, just head on over to my website, www.meganbretthamilton.com, or you can join my Facebook group, Honeybee Connection. Always remember, when you work with people, language matters, culture counts. I'll see you next time.